401k or pension, which is better? We're going to answer that today. We're going to battle it out. We're going to pick a winner. I say we. I'm going to bring on my co-host, Tony Shore. These 401k, known as a defined contribution plan versus a defined benefit plan, also known as a pension plan, which I've gone the way of the pension, as Tony says. I'm stealing his jokes now. Welcome to the show, Tony. We're going to talk about which one's better, but not so much because a lot of people don't have a choice anymore. They have one or the other. But I'm finding that this relates to retirement planning because people that have this pension are in a much better spot. But I want to go through the pros and cons. And before we start, I want to get your take, Tony. Which do you like better?
Oh, the pension by far. And I think it's sad that the creation of the 401k and the dissolvement of the pension. The 401k is great because there were a lot of jobs that people didn't get pensions on even before the 401k existed. So then they were really on their own. And I think the 401k is great because it forces people to save for retirement, or it's a great way to save without really feeling it because you can automate it. However, the pension is so much better. It's because I think it's less of your money. Obviously, the 401k leaves it all on you to fund your retirement. A pension,
and you're against personal responsibility.
I am so against. Well, we've talked about. I have severe allergies. My main allergy is to manual labor.
Growing up on a farm, that must have been tough for you.
Well, that's just what did it. People say, well, you grew up on a farm and didn't you work hard on the farm? And I go, oh yeah, starting at like 10, I baled hay, I picked rock, I walked the beans, heat, up in the hayloft in the heat, lifting heavy bales. I did it all, but I couldn't wait to get out. I'm like, I don't like this. It's what made me not like manual labor, right?
Yes. Let me go somewhere where I can just project my voice on radio waves and not move.
Exactly. So when I was a senior in high school, I got my first full-time radio job at the local station, the graveyard shift. So
did they give you a pension at that radio station?
No, there's
have
no
Have you ever had a pension?
No, I have not.
So you love it, yet you've never had it.
But I understand it because I've listened.
Let's
no, I know.
Here we go.
I know plenty of people with pensions.
All right, so let's talk about them.
They're set. They're set.
I'm going to tear you down. Okay. I'm not saying which one's better, but
pensions.
No, I don't know. So let's talk about it. I got a couple of things I want to break down. So contribution wise, you mentioned it. You feel like with a 401k, you're the one putting all of it in.
Yeah, most of it. Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of companies have a match on the 401k. But 4% is not enough.
Woohoo, 3%.
Right. But pensions, for those that are, a lot of people that have pensions do contribute to them. But even those that don't, I work 30 years and I get a pension. I never saw anything coming out of my paycheck for it. Typically, government employees, right? They get these pensions. They're not getting high paid jobs like the 401k companies are offering. You know what I mean? So if you look at it from a teacher's perspective, they have a pension. Their salary is not going to be the same as someone in the private sector that is contributing to a 401k.
True.
So you take the pros and the cons together, and the contribution part, I think people feel it more when it's a 401k versus a pension. But if you think about it in terms of salary and foregoing salary, which is then going into the pension, it seems like they're contributing less.
But I'm talking about even before the prevalence of 401k. So if we're talking about right now, yeah, pensions, hey, they're great. I still think they're a little better, but usually you have both. Even government employees have a TSP, which is a 401k that they contribute to. Otherwise, they couldn't retire. So pensions aren't what they used to be. I'm talking about like in Minnesota, where I grew up and where you lived for a while, 3M, great example.
Right. Mm-hmm.
3M, people who work for 3M or Anderson Windows, another huge Minnesota company, these big corporations, they would get a pension and profit sharing. They contributed little, if anything, out of their salaries. And 3M employees could still make good money. It's not
Right.
true that
No,
they
you're
didn't
right.
make good money. Although the ones that worked on the more manual side, like at Anderson Windows on the assembly line, yeah, their pay, their blue collar pay. So their pay wasn't great. But in the 80s and even into the 90s, they would retire very wealthy,
Correct.
very wealthy
Yes.
because of profit sharing and pensions. Now, the government, when somebody today says, "Oh, I get a pension. I'm a government employee or a teacher," not the same as what
No,
I'm
right.
talking about how it used to be. That was so much better than how it is
Mhm.
now. That's my point.
You know what I think of that? Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover
Okay,
again.
yeah, we can't go backwards, but hey, it was a lot better, wouldn't you say? I mean,
Yeah,
all the
Archie.
Anderson
Well,
employees from back then,
you're right. My wife had a pension from
that
Pepsi,
there you go.
and then they stopped the pension when she was working there, and then turned it into the 401k. And
Sure.
so, but the contributions, I agree. I like it better on the pension side, the old school pensions, because you really the company was contributing to it, but it
Right.
was a loyalty perk to get you to work there for 30 years and get the
Right.
gold watch. Okay, let's talk about control of investments, because this is a big con to the pension.
Sure.
When you have a 401k, you control how that's invested. And some people see that as a
Somewhat.
really good thing. Well, oh yeah, you have your choice. You have your choice. But I think I forget who there's been studies that show that the pension pools do better than the individual people in their 401k, because they're constantly messing with things usually. The
Yeah, it's
target date
actively
funds aren't.
managed.
Right. So, but having control of how you can invest is pretty good. Um, I think it was the Secure Act. They allow for annuities to be added to 401ks. So
Yeah.
we may be seeing some of that. People that don't necessarily want the high growth, high risk, they want the pension like from the back in the day. Maybe they can buy an annuity within the 401k, so they can have a little bit of a hybrid there.
Right.
But controlling the investments is a pro for 401ks, but it can also be a con, because a lot of people don't know anything about investing, and they mess it up,
Yeah, true.
right?
Yeah.
They'll buy, I'll buy three different target date funds because I'm not sure when I'm going to retire. And it's like, no, that's not diversification. Or, they sit all in cash at the 401k if they offer like a fixed bond portfolio and you're 35 years old. That's not a good solution. So I think this is a pro and con. I would lead this to say, though, that the 401k is a better option here when it comes to controlling investments. If we're putting them up against each other. So pensions better for contributions because you contribute less, and control of investments better for a 401k.
Yeah, but if you're going to go that route, 401k isn't as good as far as control as an IRA, because then you have complete control. A
True.
401k, some companies, you just offer, high risk, medium risk, low risk.
Right. There's very limited options. Right.
Yeah.
But you take what you can get.
Yeah, and now you can get a 401k, a Roth 401k.
Right. That's
You're
also
right.
nice.
There are.
You can't do a Roth pension.
No.
Right.
Yeah, you do have more control with a 401k. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Portability. This is the biggie, right? So, and this is getting back to the good old days when you worked 30 years at the same company, or 25, and you retired at 60, 55. You retired at 55. 30 years in, 25 to 55. In today now, to work 30 years in the same company, okay,
Never
boomer.
happens.
Okay, boomer, right? Like, who does
You're
that?
right. No, it
Right?
rarely, if ever, happens. Right.
And so the pension was kind of like a golden handcuff, meaning, man, I got no, you two teachers. I have family that are teachers. I have family that are librarians, and it's like I gotta put another 4 years in, so I have my 30. And it's like, military. I got to put in a couple more years till I get my 20.
Mhm.
And but do you really want people working for you just because they want that pension timeline? So it does create loyalty, but the 401k I think beats it, because if you switch jobs, you take your 401k and move it to an IRA or take it with you. It's portable.
Yeah.
So I like that. but you don't get it all necessarily. There's a vesting period. A lot of 401k companies, they do a match, but that match isn't yours unless you're there for 3 years, 5 years. It depends on the company.
Yeah.
So you got to
My
be careful
previous
with
company,
that.
it was 5 years. And the guy I worked with, who I was good friends there, he left after about 5 years. And the day after his last day, his first day not working there, he went to get his 401k moved. And he's like, this isn't the amount it was. This isn't it. 1 month.
Yeah.
He was 1 month away from the vesting period. So he
Right.
went in to the company. I was still there. He went in to HR. He came and talked to me first, told me what he's doing. I'm like, oh, man. He went in and talked to them, met with the president of the company, pleaded to him. They're like, no, you quit before the vesting period. Well, what if I come back to work for a month? Nope, you quit before the vesting period. So he was out. And
Yeah.
it was thousands of dollars.
Right.
So
So the portability is nice, but know the rules.
you got to know the
Right.
rules. Yeah, that was my point. I just had to tell that story because I'm
No,
like,
it's a
oh
great
my,
story because it's a
oh, and it's
real
true.
story.
It's a real story,
It's a
and that
real
really
issue.
happens to people.
They
Yeah.
don't realize, the company match goes in is calculated separately. It's there, but it's not yours until you meet their requirements of vesting.
Right.
But for the most part, portability is nice. You can't take a pension with you. Now, some
No.
you can. Some, I have clients that, I worked for a hospital, for 8 years and there's a little pension. It's not big, but it's still there. Usually when you go, when you turn 65, you start getting letters from the government saying, hey, you may have a pension here. And people are like, ooh, what's this? So portability is going to have to go to 401k.
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure.
2 for 1 right now. 401k is leading. Let's move on to the next one. Risk. What do I mean by this? Well, 2 things. One, the risk of the overall plan going under. So when you have a pension with 3M or whoever you said, what if that company goes under? Right? Who's running the ship? A lot of people don't want a pension with their company because they think the company is not going to be around for the rest of their life. It's these big institutional companies. Oh, they've been around forever. But what if you're
Kodak?
Right? Kodak, right? Kodak.
What if you worked for Kodak
Pittsburgh
in the
Steel.
80s when they were one of the top selling stocks, and you had stock options, and you had there's risk because the people who were working there when they went under, they didn't get their pensions.
Right. Well, and there's a Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, PBGC.
Yep.
Isn't that the dog breed? PB, Bichon Frise, something. I watched the Yukonuba thing. So the Pension Guarantee Fund protects up to a certain point, but if you have a Cadillac, there's a limit what it will protect.
Right. So there's some risk there, but I would argue that this is either a tie or because the risk that isn't there, if I worked for 3M and had a pension versus I worked there and they just had 401ks, I'm exposed to market risk through a 401k.
Yes.
So my 401k is 100% of what you're putting into your 401k. Typically, there are now annuities, but I don't know yet
It's
a company
usually stock bond mix.
Yep. So it's all at risk, even bonds. There's risk. So
Right.
So like in 2022, the market, if you retired in 2022, the bond market and the stock market tanked, right?
Right.
So because of COVID, we had a lot of bad downtime. So that's risk. Your 401k is at risk, I think, all the time, versus a pension. When the stock market goes down 40% and we have a bear market, my pension from 3M stays the same.
Well, so here's
Right?
the deal.
Right?
Right. You're talking about 2 different risks here.
Right.
I was talking about the overall company.
I
going
know
under,
you are.
But now we're
Yeah.
talking about investment risk. And you're right.
Yes.
You have more control and you can mess things up. You can
Yeah.
lose. Whereas the pension still goes down when the market's down 40, the pensions, because the money in the pension is still being invested.
Oh, it is.
But it's professionally managed and they're doing some things with a different time horizon. So they're
Right.
able to do some risk management techniques that you can as an individual. They'll be
Right.
buying alternative investments. They'll be doing a lot of balancing and a lot of diversification that isn't something you can get within the 401k as an individual.
Sure.
So I agree with you that it's more risky for an individual to manage their 401k than it is for the company to manage a pension.
Yes.
At the same time, the company's got to have the bigger picture of all these people and life expectancies and all that. So,
and a lot of companies collapsed, or the pension funds collapsed because
right,
of either
right.
impropriety. I mean, we saw it with what was that company? It wasn't BlackRock. It was we saw it with a lot of Enron. Yes,
Mhm.
Enron.
Yeah, I wouldn't want an Enron pension. And we're hoping that
No.
they were putting into the PBGC. So there is a risk, and I would give this risk to the pension. Now, you do run into those pensions that are underfunded because they're, like my take
Mismanaged.
my dad as an example. He doesn't have a 401k. He doesn't have a lot of assets, but he's got Social Security and he's got his pension as a New York State teacher. He retired in his 50s and he's in his 80s, so he's been on the pension for 30 years. That wasn't probably that. I mean, that was the deal. That was the deal he made.
Yeah.
The actuaries were probably wrong on it. My dad, right?
But could he have made it 30 years as comfortably on a 401k?
Right. So he worked for 36 years, I think, as a teacher, and now he's got 30 years plus into it.
He may have run out of money had he had a 401k instead of that pension. That's my point.
So I'm going to give the risk to the pension because typically people screw things up as opposed to professional group and spreading the risk out among all. Next one, death benefit. So going back to my dad now, his pension is great, but if he dies, who gets it? My mom's already passed, so nothing for me, nothing for anybody.
Yeah. Even if his wife was alive, a lot of times there's not much of a certain depends on your deal you made.
Depends on the deal you make. You choose.
Yeah. If you take a lower pension, then your wife can get it when you're gone. If you take the full Monty, then it's just you, and when you die, it's gone.
Right.
Right.
Whereas a 401k, if you die, whatever's there goes to your beneficiaries.
Yes.
Whatever's left. So this is a big factor when people say, "Oh, 401k versus pension," or if they're given the option for a lump sum of their pension versus just taking the payout. And there's not. You have to go with the 401k on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the only argument I can make for the pension is that by having a pension, it allows you to take your other assets, if you have any, and save them in a way that you're not panicking or you're not depleting them because you have the income coming from Social Security or the pension. So again, it's we did a whole show on spending down your 401k.
Or maybe you have a life insurance policy or some other type of insurance to help cover your
and the
widow
income
after your spouse.
And the pension income allows you to invest more long-term, aggressive for growth, or the pension income allows you to not deplete your 401k or your other assets so that there's more for the next generation. So you can make that case, but if I'm just going to talk straight up, I'm going 401k here.
Oh, for sure. For death benefit. Yeah.
So now we're at 3-2. Pension is better. Let's go to retirement income. And this is really what what it comes down to for me, for clients. It's not a matter of how much assets you have when you retire. It's how much income you have.
Yeah. And how long it'll last. Like, am I going to have income that I know will be there for the rest of my life? With a 401k, you don't. I don't care how much you have in a 401k. It's not guaranteed to be there every month for as long as you live, because the market could drop 60%. We could have a market crash, and then you're pulling out $80,000 a year or $50,000 a year, whatever it is, or 40, and then it depletes quicker. But with a pension, it's almost guaranteed income unless right.
And so
am I right?
You're right. And so the thing with the pensions is people that have pensions love them, but people that don't have them say, "Oh, I don't want that. I'd rather have the lump sum. I'd rather have the 401k." So who's right? I think it's the delayed gratification thing. It's also control. People like control. Here's a question.
We did a whole show on that, right? Like, take the lump. on take the
Mhm.
lump sum or,
Mhm.
and especially now for federal employees, this is a really relevant topic
It is, and that's
because
highly the lump sum amount is highly dependent on interest rates at the time. So when interest rates are really low, the lump sum amount payout was higher. Now that interest rates have come up from really historic lows, the lump sum is lower.
it is.
So it's like, what do you do? So that's a different conversation. But let's talk it through, Tony. Okay, let's give you an example. Let's say you're single, and we'll make you a woman. 62 years old. Okay, we're going to keep it simple, single life. We're not going to have a spouse. You're 62 years old, and the lump sum versus pension discussion comes up. And the pension is $75,000 a year for the rest of your life. $75,000 a year for the rest of your life. Now, I'm not even going to get into cost of living adjustments or anything. Let's just say there's no cost of living. That's the offer for you.
Mhm.
What lump sum would you say I take instead? What would that lump sum have to be for you to say, no, I don't want the 75,000, I'll take the lump sum?
It would have to be huge because I would need to be able to know I could live off the interest,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have to withstand um, Biden and Trump presidencies
Right.
doing crazy things with
There's a
our
lot to
economy.
peace of mind. There's a lot to peace of mind that we didn't talk about. Just peace of mind.
Yeah. I
Pensions
don't know. You
crush
know me, and
401ks.
you know my answer to this because you've asked me before. I would always take the payouts. If I
Right.
had a guaranteed income for life, I want that because then I don't have to ever, if somebody said the stock market's crashing, yeah, whatever.
What if I offered you $1 million?
It'd need to be more. I thought of the $1 million number. It would have to be more.
Well, it turns out that if you wanted to buy a pension
Mm-hmm.
as a single woman at age 62 in 2025, you'd need of 75,000 a year for the
Yeah.
rest of your life, you'd
Yeah.
need about $1 million.
And nobody's getting offered that payout, I bet.
Well, what is that? 7.5%. I
Yeah.
think pension, well, that's just it, isn't it? What's the payout? And it depends on the prevailing interest rates and what whose pension it is. And what I'm saying is you could buy your own pension
Right. You
by
can use
buying
a
an
fixed
annuity.
index annuity and
You
with
could
a
buy an
lifetime
income
income rider.
stream.
Yeah.
You have $1 million, you could buy $75,000 a year for life. Now, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that. I would maybe buy 4 income streams from 4 different companies to total 75,000
Yeah.
or close to it. But think about that. So when someone says I got a pension paying me 75,000, and someone else is like, well, I got $1 million. I have 900,000 in my 401k. Who's winning there? Who's winning? Because I'll tell you right now, Tony, if someone's got $1 million in their 401k, they are not going to take all million and buy lifetime income. They're just not going to do that.
They're not going to do that.
No.
Because
can't.
they're used to seeing that interest and they can't do it.
Right. But they'll do the 4% rule, right? Okay. So there's 40,000 a year for life.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the safe withdrawal rate of 4%.
Meanwhile, I'm over here living on 75
which
year.
is 7.5%. Wow. All of a sudden, when it comes to retirement income, a pension is great. But then they'll say, you know what they'll say, Tony? Death benefit. What will my kids get if I die?
Well, you use the example though of a single. That's true. She could still have children. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the single person will say, well, yeah, 75 a year for life is nice, but
Or you
what
could
if
be
I
like Warren
die after
Buffett and
5
say, my kids aren't getting my money.
Right.
They have to make it on their own.
Then I'd love to see Warren, then annuitize it, Warren. He owns an insurance company.
Yeah, you're not going to get
buy an
Warren
annuity,
Buffett.
Warren.
Warren Buffett will not buy an annuity.
No. Maybe a charitable gift annuity.
So
So
he's too busy buying and selling Apple stock to have any time or money for an annuity.
Right. So the lump sum versus pension is a separate topic. We've done a show. Maybe we'll redo that show. But just think about it. When it comes to retirement income, I give it to the pension just because.
Sure.
Right now,
you have to.
But there's no death benefit, so you can make the case. But typically, people can buy their own pension. People just don't.
Yeah.
Because they don't. The annuity is a bad word. We've done shows on
Which
that.
is crazy because it's changed. Annuity became a bad word because of the variable annuity, because there's risk and a high fee. Why would you do that? If you have market risk, put it in the market. There's lower
Right.
fees, right?
But going back to control,
Yeah.
this is another reason why having a pension is not as good as a 401k, because you could take $1 million and not necessarily buy 75,000 a year from the pension, but you could buy 30,000 a year.
Yep.
And then use the rest and have that. So there's more flexibility with
Yeah, and that's what
401k.
most financial advisors recommend, depending on your situation. And I know that's what you like to do, is say, hey, don't have all your eggs in one basket. We keep hearing that, and it's just become meaningless because everybody's heard it a million times. But it's so true, right? I mean, everybody says that. You can't have all your money in stocks in retirement and at risk. And you can't have all your money in an annuity, even if it's a fixed index annuity with no fees and a lifetime guarantee. It's just, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
No. And ideally, you have a mix. You have a mix of a pension and a
Yes.
401k. And so maybe in the ideal situation is one person of a couple, one of the couple has the pension, the other one has a 401k. And then you have the best of both worlds in a way.
Or if you don't have a pension, the one has more in a fixed index annuity, and the other has the rest of theirs in the market, right?
You could buy a pension, and one does, a little bit, and so you craft these things.
Yeah.
I will say that the reason why pensions have been replaced by 401k was not to make it easier or better for the individuals.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Right?
It was the companies. I mean, I saw it
company.
happen. There's a local company, Anderson Windows, that I grew up. My wife grew up in Stillwater, where the company's based. And so many people got so wealthy with that company because they had profit sharing and a great pension and great health benefits. But when they realized, in somewhere in the 90s, like other companies, and especially by the time they get, so they're doing away with the pension or decreasing it. There's still tiny little bit of profit sharing, but they got rid of the pension. So what they did at that time is started offering people buyouts. So they wanted to buy everybody out and put everybody on 401ks.
Get that liability off the books.
And that's what they did. And a good friend of mine, one of my neighbors who had worked for them for quite a few years, he took the buyout and retired. But now he's really scrounging and has to, he shouldn't have taken the buyout. I would have told him, I don't tell other people, and I don't know his whole situation, but I knew enough of it because I've known him for years and I see his situation. But I wish he would have talked to someone like you and gotten the math, because sure, he got an influx of money, but it wasn't $1 million. It wasn't enough to live on the rest of his life. Right.
And from the company's perspective, they're like, whew, off the books, liability gone.
Yes.
Better for
but
them.
Companies, I mean, and I'm not picking on them. They're still one of the greatest companies to work for, and I know lots of people work for them. But there are most corporations out there. Corporations don't do pensions anymore. You have to be a government employee or a public worker, like teacher, fireman.
Few and far between.
Corporations don't do pensions because they were paying for it, and they don't want the liability, and they had to pay you even when their investments went down, and their profit margins now, because their basic purpose is to drive up their stock price or keep their shareholders happy. One way to do that is to get the pensions off the books and leave the retirement planning up to the individual. So the government has created benefits like a 401k, so you get tax benefits each year. I think that's great. And now it's great that they offer Roth, right?
Yeah.
I think that's another thing you didn't mention, though, Dan, not to keep us going, but a big plus for the 401k is that you can do a Roth. And I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but I think that's a huge incentive.
It is. And that's relatively new in terms of 401ks offering that.
Yeah.
But you can create your own Roth pension after you have a Roth 401k. You could take a lump sum, and you should be saving outside of a 401k and outside of a pension anyway.
Yeah, ideally, an IRA or a Roth.
Multiple choices is the way to go here. And I don't know, Tony. I'm going to say bring back the old pensions of the 1960s.
Yes, that would be great.
But then, that's less freedom.
Yeah,
There's
true.
more, you're stuck in that company, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. I don't know.
I wanted to work for the same company for 40 years, retire with the gold watch and the pension, and they provide my health benefits to get me through to 65. That's how big corporations used to work in this country, and
Yeah.
it was awesome.
And then when they came with those automobiles and the moving pictures, once those moving pictures came,
These kids today with their
right.
video games and their pacemakers, I can't keep up with them, Dan. I can't keep up with them.
I'm going to give it to a combo. I'm going to say neither one's better. They're very different. Depends on the individual. So if you have the option and you're given the choice, you can't it's not black and white. So boring answer, but
yeah,
I would go with a combo if I had the choice.
Sure.
And that's what I do. So when people come to me to retire, we're creating income. We're also creating flexibility, and we want the best of both worlds. So, the people that have a big pension and that's it, they're kind of stuck, but they learn to live. So thanks for a good show, Tony. Thanks for showing your age and your bias against evil companies. And
that's not a bias.
And your love for innocent overpriced windows.
Oh, now come on.
We got those bloated pensions we got to pay for.
The best windows in the business.
All right. Take care. Have a good week, everybody.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.